Loving Sairam, Sitaram, Assalamu alaikum, and a pleasant good evening to one and all. I am Faiz Mohammed, Deputy Central Coordinator of the West Indies. Welcome to episode 2 of the series Unite and Inspire, a series designed to uplift, unite, and inspire spiritual aspirants on the path to self-discovery. This is an offering of the Sri Satya Sai Baba organization of Trinidad and Tobago, which also seeks to provide a medium to archive the experiences and personal transformation of devotees, mainly from the West Indies region, by responding to questions provided by the archiving guidelines. Those viewing can make comments and ask questions using the chat box, and once time permits, we will facilitate. We want everyone to continue to offer their prayers, their best wishes, and their good thoughts to all those that are suffering in the world, and especially in St. Vincent, where there is a volcanic eruption taking place. Let us continue to radiate love and light to one and all. Today, we are extremely fortunate, blessed, and honored to have as our special guest, Dr. Phil Gosselin. Dr. Gosselin is currently the chairperson for Zone 1 of the Satya Sai International Organization. He is also co-chair of the SSIO Archiving Committee. He has been a past USA Sai Organization Central Coordinator and a past USA Central Council President. He's one of the original USA Central Council members announced at the 1975 World Conference in Sai's presence. He has had the great good fortune to live in Prashanti Nilayam and has many divine experiences with Swami. Brother Phil, welcome to our program, Unite and Inspire. And
Thank you.
My first question to you is, how did you first come into contact with Sri Satya Sai Baba?
Yes. I'm very happy to see everyone, or at least who I see here that I haven't seen in a while. So I'm hoping that everyone's healthy and has gotten through this terrible year with elevated spirituality coursing through your veins. So to get to the obvious question, which we ask people all over the world, and in some countries like Australia, they made a point of when they wanted to interview people and people thought this was too much to tell their whole story at once. So they broke it down. Just tell us how you came to Sai Baba. And so they got several hundred interviews like that. And I was telling Faiz that in 1971, things were so quiet there in Prashanti Nilayam. And there was very little known about Swami around the world, but somehow he would attract people. And that one of our main entertainments of the day was there was one bus a day that came into town at 8:30. It left at 5:30 in the morning to go to Bangalore, and it came back in the afternoon, got in at 8:30. And we would go to greet the bus, because there were very few people that got off the bus, but a few that did looked like, how did I get here?
We seem to be experiencing a little technical difficulty with Brother Phil, so we'll pause for a little while until he reconnects. I know sometimes the internet gives little difficulties, so we are trying to reconnect with him. So just bear with us, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Phil.
Fives?
Yes,
I'm back.
yes. Go
I'm
right
sorry.
ahead.
Sorry about that. I don't know what that was about. So let's see. So that caused the death of another living being, caused some searching, some soul searching in me. And then a year later, my grandfather died, and we were at his funeral service, and very high flown ideals and spiritual values were expressed. And I realized that was really true, and that the people expressing them were telling the truth, but they had no idea what they were saying, really. And I sort of said, you know, there must be an answer, there must be a way. And so I started gravitating towards spiritual books, Autobiography of a Yogi and Bhagavad Gita when I was high school. Then when I was in college, late 60s, gurus were just starting to come from India. And so I went to see as many as I could, eventually seeing about 50 of them. And so I had to sort of a chance to take a look at it. By summer of 1969, I was coming into my senior year, my last year of college, and I had decided I wanted to find a guru. And that summer, Satya Sai Baba's name was mentioned, but there was very little known about him. And then in November of 69, Newsweek magazine, and I had a sort of an addiction to media, you might say. And Newsweek magazine used to have a religion section. And I think I sent this on to you, Fiz. You can distribute it to whoever. It's that article. And in it, basically they said, well, Westerners may have a hard time believing in the miracles. There's no doubt he has the ability to plant the seed of faith in people's hearts. It was a beautiful photo, and I was quite struck by it. And the next week, I was at a party and I was bored, and on a little bit of the bottom of a little free newspaper, it said, for more information about Satya Sai Baba, write to Dick Bach. And so I did. And of course, this is, you know, more than 50 years ago, and very little was known. The following week, I was at a conference, and his name was mentioned again. And the next week was Christmas, and my father knew I had an interest in Eastern spirituality. And so we went to this tiny little record store, and he got me, just picked out, he knew nothing about it. He picked it out, Satya Sai Baba Chants the Bhajans. And it was, you know, that record sold, you know, maybe 1,000 copies at the time. So then I was planning to go to India, and I did as soon as I could after I graduated. And there was another story in which I was a taxi driver to make the money to go there. And my last night as a taxi driver, I had like a little puja table on my front there. And the fellow started to rob me. He'd put a knife to my throat. And I'm looking at the puja table. I was thinking, hey, this isn't how this is supposed to end. Because he's saying, he said, where's the money? I said, well, this is all I have. He said, there better be more. And I could feel it tugging. And at that moment, two undercover policemen jumped out with drawn guns, stuffed them in the back seat, and caught the bad guys. And I thought, that's the end of my taxi driving career. And went to India the following week, and more adventures. And yeah, so maybe that's maybe enough for how I got to see Swami.
Phil, that is a very adventurous and movie type kind of meeting with
Soon
the
to be a
Lord.
major motion picture.
So, Brother Phil, kindly share with us two of your most memorable experiences you've had with Mother Sai over the years.
Well, continuing about when I first came to see Swami, so I arrived there in the morning, and there were only a few people out, and there was someone I recognized from New York, but he was a little bit crazy, and he was silent, and he was sitting in the middle of the hot sun, and he sort of motioned for me to sit there. So I thought, well, I sat there for 15, 20 minutes, and I thought, well, maybe this is the sadhana that you do here. You're silent and you sit in the hot sun. Fortunately, after about an hour, someone retrieved me. And that afternoon, Swami came out. And I was expecting someone very kind of light and sort of, I don't know, just very light and smiley and whatever. And when he came around the corner at the Whitefield, the gate, it felt like very, very deep music. And I was really quite stunned. And I was so stunned, I didn't even realize it, but my jaw unhinged. It went like this. I was like this. And Swami comes up and down between the two lines of the men and the women. And he comes by and he looks at me and he looks down and he sort of bends and he looks down and he looks into my mouth and he laughs and he goes on. So that made a big impression upon me. And another one is a sort of a well-known story, but I happened to be there. If you know the Diana Baskin story about the rainbow in Puttaparthi. So this was after afternoon darshan and Prasanti Nilayam, probably I think maybe fall of 71. And it was my practice to go up beyond the meditation tree up to the top now, where now this is all very almost forested and regrown. But at the time it was like open, bare land. And you could see across to where the water tank is now on the next hill. And just looking out there, it's always a very beautiful scene. But this day, there were a few clouds in the sky, but not much. And this rainbow unfurled straight down about a quarter of a mile about where the water tank was. And it just came down, just unfurled straight down, not an arc, it's just straight down, and it came down. There weren't many clouds around, it wasn't raining, and it stayed there for a little while. And I watched and I watched and I thought, and then after a while, it just sort of unfurled, went back right up the way it came. And, I thought, well, this is really wonderful. India is such a wonderful place. All of these amazing things happen. And of course, later, we found out that it had to do with Diana Baskin's husband at the time. And he had said, he was very skeptical of Swami. He said, if he's so great, if he's so, all powerful, let him make me a rainbow. And Swami did. And so the next day they were called for an interview and Swami asked him, how did you like your rainbow? And so it's nice, we're each part of each other's stories with Swami. When he has a story, he involves lots of people. And it's good for our spiritual elevation to take part in other people's stories, because I hesitate to say it because I'm not at that spiritual level, but we all are all one. So we need to partake of that. Yeah.
So Brother Phil, at what age did you first visit Prasanti Nilayam?
I was 21.
21.
I just graduated from college.
Okay. So looking at the third question, what does Sai Baba mean to you?
Okay, because you gave me the questions in advance, fortunately I had a chance to think about it. And I suppose what it most meant to me was that love and God can concretize. In other words, the word God is so, you might say, overused that let's say by the time Buddhism came around, they said, hey, we're not even going to mention God. Just the word is, it just has become like a cliche or something like that. But now we see that God is alive and fully alive and fully with us. It's really quite an impressive thing, and that love can take a form. And that's really, really quite amazing. I was thinking that, the story of Hislop with the saris, that story still boggles my mind, in which Swami gave out like 96 saris, and there were 4 left over in the box. and Hislop was looking at them, and he noticed that they seemed kind of wet. And so he examined them, and there seemed to be drops of like salt water on them. And he asked Swami, what's this? Swami said, well, you see, these saris weren't chosen to be distributed by Swami. So they're tears of sadness. So, you know, I can't really wrap my head around it, but I think it's sort of an emblem of anything is possible. You know, as the Narasimhan avatar, you know, the avatar, the lion avatar jumped out of the iron pillar. So it seems to me that that's once again real and possible. And furthermore, it's more real than what we call reality. Reality is this computer, these glasses, this place, that place. It has a certain reality to it. But this, the love and God, they exist way, way beyond that, you know, and much more powerful, much more real. The unreal is more real than the real, like that.
So Phil, somebody at the tender age of 21, when you look at young people in the society today at 21, they're more involved and attracted to fast cars, to modern kind of living, watching movies. Was there a particular incident that spurred you on to look at your spiritual purpose in life? Or was that a longing that you had growing up always to
Well, that's
inquire
why I
about
mentioned
purpose?
those incidents when I was a teenager. Those for me were personally markers that, like, hey, I don't believe what everyone else believes. I'm not on this bus. You know, this is something wrong here. So yeah, on the lookout.
So how has practicing the teachings of Sai Baba over the years you've been in contact with him, how has that impacted and transformed and continues to transform your life?
That's, I think, of the 8 questions you gave, I think that was the toughest, because obviously we're all works in progress, and it's kind of hard to step outside of ourselves to see, you know, what I would have been otherwise, or how this goes, or without bringing in my own concepts or desires or images or whatever. But for sure, Satya Sai has saved me from a lot of confusion and a lot of mistakes. There would have been loads and loads. There were plenty of mistakes, as it were, but there would have been loads more. And that feeling that freedom is not that far away, that thinking about Sai gets us closer to freedom, and he's obviously free, and we can be free too. And just the joy in life, knowing that that joy I felt with Swami can be the substrata, the underneath, the pulsing part of life for everything. Maybe those are there are many different things that impacted, certainly giving a purpose to life. And he gave so many guidances and things like that. So like that, I think.
Satya Sai Baba says that I am God, but you are God also. The only difference is I know that I am God, whereas you do not. The average person, even devotees, are having tremendous difficulty embracing, understanding, and even believing that statement from the point of view that I am God, the omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent God. Me, who sometimes errs and deviates and do a little bit of wrong things and tell a little white lie there. How can I really be God?
Yes, yes, it's God in form doing some foolish things. So we all do foolish things, and we all sort of at times buy into, oh, I'm this sinner, or I'm no good, or I didn't do what I was supposed to do, or my fate is marred in some way, or the mark of Cain is on my brow, or however you want to put it. It's all the same. It's these things where we limit ourselves. You know, if you know, you remember the old English classic Gulliver's Travels. he was a giant, but the Lilliputians, one little strand at a time, they were able to pin him to the ground. And Swami says it's like that, like our thoughts are like that. You know, he uses the metaphor of the handkerchief. You know, the handkerchief isn't very strong, but if you tie all of these little tight thoughts together, they become kind of impenetrable. And that's the same with our thoughts. We think, oh, I'm Joe Smith. Oh, I'm this place. Oh, I'm this status. Oh, I'm this, and I lack this, and I need this, and you know, my life is this, and I'm not good enough, and blah blah blah. And after a while, you start to believe it. It's like method acting. You know, you throw yourself into the part, and we've done that. We threw ourselves so into the part we totally believe it. But the reality is, you know, I said before that God had become a cliche, but for me, I love saying God. And as a matter of fact, sometimes I have to curb it a little bit, you know, depending on who I'm with. But one time I saw this artist, he had done a giant neon sign. And I love neon, the color of it and the electricity of it. But of course, mostly it advertises junk. But in this case, he did a 10-foot neon sculpture that just said God. And to me, that's, I like that. And so, you know, we have the bhajans, I am God, I am God, I am no different than God. And now we're studying for the Aradhana Sutra Vihini, again, very much focused on I am God. The World Conference we had in 2010 was very focused on that. And I think we're a little shy about being God, shall we say. We think I don't qualify because I did X, Y, and Z. But in the end, you're still going to be God anyway. So it'll just interfere slightly with your getting to that knowledge. So I think we should embrace it. Swami said we are. Of course, if we get into the headspace of I'm God and you're not, that's not going to work too well. So it only works if everything is God. If we're God, then everything is God. And yeah.
So, Phil, while you were talking, I'm sure you would recall an experience with Phyllis Crystal, who, coming from a Catholic or Christian background, when she got an interview with Swami, Swami told her to say, I am God.
Yes.
And she couldn't bring herself to say that until Swami had to reiterate and encourage her and prod her to say,
Yeah.
because she never believed before, and based on her indoctrination and how she grew up, to say, I am God, it sounds like blasphemy. But
I visited her when she was 100 years old and living in Switzerland. And she was living by herself in her own apartment. And that was really quite impressive. And she told me, yeah, I'm thinking I'd like to move back to where I first grew up outside of London. And so at 101, she then moved again. So she was not your average person, shall we say. But you know, at first meeting her, you would think, oh, this person is very sort of light and nothing much happening. But really, we can't judge things by their outer things. She was very solid spiritual person.
so, if you were to come back to that statement you made, Phil, about Swami telling us that I am God, I am not different from God, I am truth, consciousness, and bliss, fear, grief, and anxiety can never affect me. We listen to Swami affirming that and sharing that with us and reminding us about it.
Yes.
And sometimes we intellectually and from a knowledge and mental perspective, we logically understand that. But it doesn't seep into our belief system to the point, as you said, where it motivates and inspires our daily activities. So,
Yes.
what would you say prevents us from truly manifesting that divinity a lot in our lives?
Well, I think part of us thinks it's blasphemy, you know, and or it's impossible. But I had a dream once that was helped me a great deal about this, and I'm a cognitive psychologist, which means that we work on people's thoughts, that thoughts are sometimes repetitious and unhelpful. And I had one myself, which I would say to myself, if things were going badly, I would say to myself, there's nothing that can save you, which is a ridiculous thing for a devotee to say, of course. And, but it would still be like if things were going badly, I would say that to myself. And one night in the dream, I was there with a very dear friend of mine from high school. And we're there with Swami, and Swami is speaking to us. And we're both crying. And we're crying because he's saying to us, there's nothing that can save you. And I thought, oh, that's really rough, really rough. After all of these things, like hoping that there's going to be someone that's going to come and save us. And he's saying, there's nothing that can save you. And so we're crying and crying. But then he says, but there's nothing that can hurt you. And what I realized with that was basically, you're God. And if you're God, there's nothing that can save you. I mean, what's to save? And if you're God, nothing can hurt you. So this is really a tough one because, when we see the horrible things in the world, the killing and the genocide and all of these terrible things, and very scary things, and very unjust things, and things that just don't seem right, like children dying and things like that. How can that fit? Well, it doesn't really fit unless we're God. If we're God just trying out these different roles, we're playing this role. In this role, I'm, king of Siam. In this role, I'm the beggar in Calcutta. In this role, I'm, the CEO of this. In this, I'm the worker over here. In this, I'm the one that has, a terminal disease. In this, I'm, on and on and on, like that. In other words, we identify with our role, but if we step outside of our role, we see we're just playing a role. See, I have this white beard. This is to make me look wise. I'm playing a role.
And we all have to play our parts well.
Yes, exactly. Because you play your parts well, then you can unhook from it. And Swami says, keep your eye on the director. You'll find this world is full of crooks and cranks. Keep your eye on the director. You play your role as the director tells.
Phil, it is such an interesting point you made. If I am to say it differently, somebody goes to the cinema, they look at a movie, they know it is a movie, it's not real, but yet we get caught up in the plot, the acting, and we begin to experience emotions like fear, hatred, happiness, sadness. We really believe at that time that it is real. But the guy who is showing the projector and doing it 3 times a day and 4 times, his foot is on top of a table and he's eating popcorn, unaffected by what is on the screen.
Yes.
So
yes.
As you rightly said, when we become identified with the role and feel that that is real, is
Yes.
where the challenge really lies.
Yes, exactly.
Very interesting, Phil.
I like the one, Swami, you like to do those metaphors about the cinema. And he said one time, you're like a Tamil audience watching a Telugu film. So you see all of this action and all of this stuff, and there's people throwing punches and riding off into the sunset and stuff, but you have no idea what's going on. He said people in this world are a little bit like that, They sort of see all this stuff, but they don't really figure out what the meaning of it all is.
Right, Phil, it leads me to the next question, and I'm letting the interview flow accordingly.
Okay.
Is that in the organization, it's made up of hundreds of thousands of members. We are situated in different countries. We come from different backgrounds, different personalities, different upbringing, different religions. And sometimes when we come together in the personalities, sometimes there is misunderstanding, there's miscommunication, there is a disconnect at times, differences of opinion, and sometimes it rubs us the wrong way, and there is hurt, there's pain, there's sadness. What should be one's mindset in the light that Swami says, never leave the organization, and whatever is happening in the organization is happening for your own spiritual good? What should be the mindset, especially with devotees, to use these experiences to become bigger, better, and stronger, especially in the light of ongoing conflicts and misunderstandings?
Yes, Swami used to talk about adjustment sadhana. In other words, we have all of these little differences, but he's called it just adjustment sadhana. And he also, of course, told the metaphor of the blind man with the elephant. Everyone sees something slightly different, or they see Swami in a slightly different way, or just a slightly different part of the whole thing. But uh, this, and I also, my own personal metaphor that I think of is, I think of it's like a very dry riverbed, and there are all of these stones in the riverbed, and nothing has moved for thousands of years. They're just sitting there. All of a sudden, the water comes pouring through. There's like a flash flood. In this case, it's like a flash flood of grace, and it just comes roaring through, and it's cooling and wonderful. But meanwhile, in that flash flood, the rocks kind of bang against each other. They're like, "Hey, don't bang against me." it's it's kind of funny. So it's Swami. Obviously, he was attracting people from all different backgrounds, and that was very deliberate. I mean, there are people from different backgrounds who had an interest in seeing the Lord in particular, and he answered he answered that call. But on top of it, I think he liked to see people sort of mix it up a little bit. He liked to see different people, uh, sort of, those stone tumblers that they have. You put the tumblers in, and they sort of smooth each other out as they tumble around, and then some come out like gems. I thought of Swami like that. But I have a particular example when in the early 70s, most of the US devotees were in Southern California. And there were two different, very different groups. There was groups like Elsie Cowan, who were very, very conservative and wealthy and very, very different. And then there was sort of like a lot of street people who were hippies and had long hair. And the two groups had to get together. And it was very funny, actually. And at one point, I think Elsie was complaining to Swami about it. Swami says, and he started pulling on his own hair. He says, "See, I have long hair also." So yeah, that's one of we should take it with a lot of humor. We should take it with a lot of humor that we're in this role and that person's in that role. And amongst the Psi world, you meet so many interesting people with so many different backgrounds, and it's a chance to learn, chance to be with people that normally you wouldn't.
So, Phil, it leads me to another question. Swami says, love all and serve all. How do I practice loving those who criticize me, who say bad things about me, who insult me, who ill speak me? What are some of the things, if a devotee is being radiated, that he's receiving all of this, that it's coming from the outside? This person doesn't like me, that person ill speaks me, he's always saying bad things. How can I use that? And if I want to practice loving that person, what can I do to radiate love in the light of that?
I'm sure there are a lot of people, maybe most of the people can do this better than I can about, the radiating the love. But my own thing that I like to think of when someone's saying ill of me, it's, first I remember what Swami said. If they're speaking ill of you and it's not true, then why get upset? That's just, there's hot air. If it is true, then it's an opportunity to try and reset yourself. It's, even if you don't like the medicine, it's useful medicine. But how I get along with this best is if someone's speaking ill of me and I don't think it's true, I think to myself, jackpot. I've hit the jackpot. Because with Swami says, when people are speaking ill of you and you stay calm and cool, this is where you're really acquiring spiritual merit, particularly if people are verbally abusing you when you're trying to do Swami's work. Then it's going directly to him. So it's sort of like I think of it's like bonus points. So I'm not sure if this will work for everyone, but anyway, it's just something that happens for me.
I remember when Dr. Reddy was here, he made a comment when he came to Trinidad, and he said if somebody is saying bad things about you, especially if you hold office or a position, he said that means you're doing very good work.
Can't always say that, but it's yeah, it's if you're an officer and you haven't had people say, "Oh, you're the greatest thing ever," and someone else say, "You're the worst, you're the problem, you're the reason everything isn't working right," then you haven't had the full Psi officer experience. Swami says you're three people: the one you think you are, the one others think you are, and the one you really are. And in this case, there's be some people who think, you're an officer, therefore you must be some kind of chosen whatever. And that's kind of fun when people do that. But of course, it's not so accurate. And then there'll be other people that say, well, Psi's ideals are so elevated, and here's what you've done compared to that. It's like nothing. It must be your fault. And that's better for you, actually. that also actually helps in a certain way.
Another point I want to, or I feel could be beneficial, especially to our audience here, is one of the 9-point code of conduct, Phil, is speaking, as Swami says, to speak lovingly, sweetly, at all times. And this has been a challenge for a lot of devotees in the sense of how we practice that speaking softly, sweetly, and lovingly. Now, there are many of us who speak softly, we speak sweetly, but we can also speak cuttingly. So, Swami has added on lovingly to ensure you may have a soft, soothing voice, but you also come out in this cutting way. And sometimes there are naturally devotees who are a little bit loud in the way they speak, but inside is softness. So the how we navigate that practicing to speak lovingly, sweetly in our interactions, it may vary from devotee to devotee. But from your experience and being so long in the organization, how does one navigate practicing this in the best possible way?
Well, I think the first step has to do with the decibel level. I think getting the decibel level down, because we know when things are loud or soft. And also, Swami has said that sound is divine. Sound is God. Sound is an emanation of God, and therefore should be respected at all times. So that means that you use the minimum of sound to convey your message. So you don't make a lot of extra noise, because that sort of ruffles the atoms or molecules around, and we want everything to be as smooth as possible. So that's a good start. And for some people I know people who have, had that problem of being very angry and with her words and stuff. I mean, took vows of silence or put pebbles in their mouth or whatever it is. I wouldn't suggest any of that, and that seems a little bit extravagant. Swami wants us to be sort of slow and steady, but it's useful to know if there are times where we're going to be overly cutting, and to sort of prepare ourselves in advance. If we know we're going to go into a situation where things tend to be heated, we want to sort of have a plan in advance. I think we want to figure out We want to remember Swami in particular. We want to remember our own determination to avoid this problem again. And we want to try and see how we did in this problem. And sometimes I tell people, be like a scientist with a clipboard. You know, you're watching yourself, you're stepping outside of yourself and you're saying, well, we had this problem and we're going to do this experiment. We're going to try this again. And how did this work? Or how did this not work? What did I learn from this? What didn't work? What did work? Anyway, those are just a few suggestions.
And Phil, again, as you were speaking, it connects me to the other question. As we were talking and discussing before, there will be misunderstandings, misinformation, disagreements, differences of opinion. What has Swami said about how we should resolve? Because you will have different personalities and different viewpoints, but whenever there are conflicts or misunderstandings, what is Swami's preferred guidance as to how conflicts should be resolved within the organization?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure that there's a one size fits all on that, but there a number of things have I could say. One is when there's any kind of conflict, have as few people involved as possible. In other words, there's no need for, reply all. If you're hot under the collar, don't hit reply all. And that's just sort of basic, that's just basic etiquette for the regular world, much less the Satya Sai world. If there's some problem, let's say you feel you have a problem with another person or you don't think they're doing the right thing, you speak as gently as possible to them. You hint at it. If they don't take the hint, you be a little clearer. You provide sort of direct examples or whatever. You do it going in, also telling the things you admire about them. If that doesn't work, you be on the lookout for someone that they might listen to. If that doesn't work, you appeal to some slightly up the chain of authority. But hopefully all of this takes place with as few people involved as possible, because there's no need to engross the other devotees in a sort of a drama or a soap opera or whatever. It's just it takes away from their concentration on their sadhana. Sometimes you have to tell the whole group, but that's sort of a last resort, I think.
And Phil, also, if after you've exhausted every possible avenue of bringing it resolved, you feel that the best thing is to leave it alone for some time.
Yeah, that would be good, because it, maybe things have gotten a little hot, or a little people have gotten an entrenched point of view or whatever. So yeah, that's possible. To take a break on it, come back to it, and see if things look different down the road.
Okay, Phil, the next question is, sometimes we have to make a decision in life. We are at the crossroads of certain situations that present itself, and we want to get Swami's guidance as to which is the best route for me without my ego getting involved. I want to know, what does God really want me to do here in my best interests? So if I'm praying to Swami for this guidance, how should I go about it in the sense of removing myself and the ego from the situation? And having done that, how do I know within that this is the decision that Swami wants me to put into practice?
I was in an interview once, and Swami made a point of always ask Swami before you make a major decision if there's any question or you're not sure. But don't wait until you're in the middle of the crossroads to ask. You ask in advance and you think about it. You try and get yourself in a relaxed, focused kind of point of view. You ask Swami, you listen. He said in 15, 20 minutes, you should get some kind of an answer. And that and I think keep talking to him about it. You know, if you think, Swami, I have this problem, I'm not sure which way to go, and then you say, well, I'm thinking a little bit, I'm leaning like this, and I'm hoping this is you sort of nudging me in this direction. If this isn't the right way, please show me, and like that. So
It's interesting, Phil. The little challenge is, let's say the answer comes, sometimes the ego gets involved. So it's like ego versus God. God has given me the answer here, but my ego is allowing me to say, no, no, that's not the way. Maybe there's another way. So there's a lack of surety. So to know for sure that this is coming from Sai, um, I guess one has to be open and aware of the signs that, because it could take many different forms. It could take a friend talking to you, reading a book, or seeing a Swami video, giving a talk, and it suddenly hits you.
yes, he said if you make the wrong choice, but you've already asked in advance, you know, he'll bring you back to the path. So it's you know, there's a safety valve there. So yeah, like that, like that. Okay.
So, Phil, on another note, how do I know when Sai is pleased with me? So I'm doing his work, I'm trying my best to please him. Are there things that I can look for within or without that will allow me to feel that yes, Swami is happy with me, Swami is pleased with me, and that can give me encouragement and confidence and hope to continue,
Yeah, I think
especially
it.
as the physical presence is no longer here.
Yes, 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 yes. So it seems to me that doing our best, if we feel we've done our best and that we've dedicated it to Swami, then I think then there's some feeling of having pleased him or pleased ourselves in that way. So I think that again, keeping the talking going. Swami, would you be pleased if I did this? Swami, I'm doing this to please you. I hope these are, you know, just how you want me to do this. Or do you have any other thing that you want me to do, Swami? In other words, keeping that going, then you're more likely to have that feeling that even if you did the wrong thing, you spent all of that time with Swami. And so I think you're a winner at this game already. So like that.
Phil, while you were talking, it reminded me of a guideline and practice I've seen um, being done where I've seen somebody have a bracelet WWJD. What would Jesus do? So we as Baba devotees, we could probably substitute WW Sai D. What would Sai do
Yes.
in a situation like this? I think
Yes.
that's a good guiding point as well when you're in a situation and don't know what to do. What would Mother Sai do here? What would Sai Baba do here? And
Yes.
that could probably prompt you in the right direction.
I'm sort of smiling here because I had clients who sort of I had a client who gave me a bracelet. It says WWPT. What would Phil think? But
Well, that's interesting.
I think the idea is right. You know that that's how we should approach things. So
And Phil, it reminds me to, I remember in our Bal Vikas or SSE classes, they had also shared this concept that children can practice, and I think it's across the board. When you're faced with a situation and you don't know what's the best action, ask yourself, is what I'm about to think, is what I'm about to speak, is what I'm about to do going to be pleasing to Swami?
yes,
And if the answer
yes,
is yes, you go right into it. If it's no, you desist. But Swami said if the answer comes back as doubts, you don't know what to do, he said do nothing until the uncertainty is clarified.
yeah. I think that's a good approach. I
And
think
it
that that
ties in nicely with what you've said.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, Phil, we have approximately 12 minutes And I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to open up the lines a little bit for
Okay.
devotees to make
Okay.
comments.
Good, good, good.
And the last question deals with commitment. In many organizations throughout the world, and inclusive of the Psi organization, you get 20% of members doing 80% of the work. In the Psi organization, there's no difference. In fact, sometimes I feel maybe in the Psi organization it's a little bit less. That you just get a handful of people who do the majority of the work. So my question is, how can we increase commitment among the membership in the organization?
Well, I think first is that this is unlikely to change. In other words, I think that's the way of the world. And you're probably right. It's more intense in the Psi organization because when people go to work, to keep their job, they're going to have to do a minimum of such and such. So it's the amount done by everyone is a little bit more similar. But in the Psi organization, it's all volunteer, it's all free. There's no one telling you have to do this. So it really varies. So it seems to me the motivator is ourselves. If we are doing our practice, maybe service or whatever it is, with joy,
Yes.
then the people around us say, hey, this is attractive. I want this. This is, how do I get involved like that? How can I do that? And so I think that's really the biggest thing that we could do. I think, of course, we want to remember that Psi is the inner motivator, not just in the, how everything in the whole world moves, but particularly at this level, about people working in the Psi organization. He'll give impulses and tendencies and thoughts and attractions and things like that. So it really varies. So I don't think we should, I think as an organization, we should try and make our programs attractive. We should be nice to the people. We should explain what's happening. All of those, obvious kind of good things to do to help people along in that. But at the same time, each person has their own path, is really how Swami has it laid out. Some will be more interested in bhajans, some will be more interested in service, some will be more interested in study. And on top of that, some are approaching the God. If you think of God as a mountain, some are taking, the straight path up, hand over hand, right up the cliff as fast as they possibly can. It's a brutal climb. Whereas some are taking the leisurely stroll that sort of strolls through the meadow around the bottom of the mountain and, going here and there. And I think that's sort of how it is.
Thank you
That's
very, very much for it. It's been a very enthralling, inspiring, provocative, thought-provoking
Thank you.
discussion. May we all now together do the Samasta Loka as we pray for the peace and prosperity of all beings. Samasta Loka
Sukhino
Sukhino
bhavantu
Bhavantu Samasta
samastaloka
Loka
sukhino
Sukhino
bhavantu
Bhavantu Samastaloka
samastaloka
Sukhino
sukhino
Bhavantu
bhavantu
Om Shanti
Shanti
Shanti Shanti
Shanti
Jai Sai Ram.
Jai
Jai
Sai
Sai
Ram,
Ram,
Jai
Sai
Sai
Ram,
Ram,
So
Jai
Sai
long,
Sai
everyone.
Ram,
Be
Sai Ram,
happy. Jai Sairam. Thank you.
Sai Ram, Sai Ram, everybody.